Good evening, everybody. This is episode 27 of BB True Crime. I am Becky.
And I'm Beth.
And we are here today to look at the Menendez Brothers.
The Menendez Brothers. That is right.
So, I have obviously, as most people in this world are aware of, heard of the case of the Menendez Brothers. I have looked into it a little bit, but to be honest, I looked and I was like, oh my god, and then I closed the tab. I was like, no.
It's definitely more of a famous case.
Yes.
And it's still, whether or not they did it and the reasons for if they did it are still very much debated and unknown today.
I did hear someone say when they were discussing the case that if the Menendez brothers had been the Menendez sisters, it wouldn't have been nearly as controversial as it was.
True, a lot of people sort of give them the benefit of the doubt because they find them attractive. So this is a very much kind of like Ted Bundy thing.
The fuck?
Yeah, you get them crime people that are like, oh, I'm a true crime fan, but I fancy Richard Ramirez and...
Why would you fancy Richard Ramirez?
And Ted Bundy. Hot. And the Menendez brothers.
Man's not hot.
None of them
Never
are
hot.
Honestly. But you get them people. So let's crack into it and see what you think at the end.
Tell me.
Okay.
Give it to me.
So, Joseph Lyle Menendez was born January 10th, 1968.
Okay. And
his brother Eric Galen Menendez was born November 27th, 1970. So 2 years apart.
2 years apart.
They are the American brothers who were convicted in 1996 for the murders of their parents, Jose and Mary Louise Menendez.
Okay.
So, we'll start. This is when we go back in time now.
Okay. Take it back.
Start with the father. So, Eric and Lyle's father, Jose Enrique Menendez, was born on the 6th of May 1944 in Havana, in Cuba.
He's Cuban. Okay, I thought he was Mexican or something. Cuban.
Yeah, Cuban. So, at the age of 16, shortly after the start of the Cuban Revolution, which I know nothing about, just so you know, he moved to the United States.
Okay.
Jose then attended a Illinois university.
Chicago boy.
And that's when he met Mary Louise, also known as Kitty Anderson. And they married in 1963.
Okay.
And then they moved to New York. And Jose earned an accounting degree from Queens College.
Nice. And
that was around the time that they had their first son, Joseph Lyle Menendez, who goes by his middle name. So Lyle is the eldest. And like I said, born January 10th, 1968 in New York. Kitty then quit her teaching job after Lyle was born to take care of the family, be like sort of a housewife, yeah.
Got it.
So then after Lyle was born, they moved to New Jersey.
Okay.
Which was where Eric was born 2 years later.
Okay.
So in the summer of 1976, Lyle and Eric's cousin, Diane van der Molen, what a name, came to stay with them.
Okay.
She claims that Lyle, again the eldest brother, confessed to her that he was being sexually abused by his father.
Okay.
She then told his mum, Kitty, what he'd said, but the mum took Jose's side and said that she thought the girl was lying.
Okay. Interesting she said the girl was lying, not Lyle was lying.
Yeah, but Lyle never told his mum.
Okay.
She told them.
Okay.
Their cousin told them.
Oh,
so they never told the parents.
So the parents,
or the mum.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. She also recalls that after that, Kitty had taken Lyle upstairs, and that was the last time that it was ever brought up to her.
Okay.
So I don't know if they had like a discussion or whatever.
Probably mention it.
But it was never mentioned again.
Yeah.
So later on, in 1986, Jose's career, he was a corporate executive at this point.
Okay.
So gone up in the world. he had recently joined the company, which was formerly known as the International Video Entertainment, and he took the family to Beverly Hills. Obviously, they were very well off.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were very rich. Specifically Jose. So yeah, they're now in Beverly Hills in California.
Okay.
The following year, Eric, the youngest, began attending Beverly Hills High School. But he was only getting like average grades.
Okay.
But he was very good at tennis.
Okay.
Yeah, very talented. He ranked 44th in the US for 18 and under players.
Nice.
So not bad.
That's good.
Lyle, he attended Princeton University. Yeah. But was very quickly put on academic probation because he was getting terrible grades, and eventually he got suspended for plagiarism.
Ah, shit.
So Jose's sort of building them, wanting them to be these top school,
academic dream, kind of American
and
redemption.
Lyle specifically, because Eric's got his tennis.
Yeah.
So he can fall on that. Lyle is just not doing good in anything.
Okay.
This is a bit like the black sheep. But the brothers are very, very close.
Okay.
Very close. So, this is the incident. On the evening of August 20th, 1989, Jose and Kitty were standing in their den in their Beverly Hills mansion when Lyle and Eric entered carrying shotguns. Jose was shot 6 times, including a fatal shot in the back of his head, with a Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun.
That's a big gun.
Yeah, well, they can afford it, can't they? Kitty was shot 10 times in total. Before the fatal shot, which was fired into her cheek, she was on the ground trying to crawl away and moaning. But then they shot her, obviously, fatal shot as she was trying to escape.
In the face.
In the face.
That shit's personal.
Yeah.
You don't shoot somebody in the face unless you're feeling things.
Yeah. Lyle then ran to the car to reload, because as she was crawling away, he was like, hold on, I'm running low on ammo. Went to the car, reloaded, came back, shot the mum in the face. Killed her. Fatally. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So, immediately after the killings, the brothers remained in the house. They expected the police to respond from the noise of the shotguns.
Yeah?
But no one did.
Okay.
So, the brothers then picked up the shotgun shells.
Oh, they tried to cover up their tracks.
Yeah. And
now they haven't immediately been caught.
Yeah. So then they left the house to dispose of these shells and build an alibi. The brothers then returned to the house later that night and then phoned the police saying, someone's killed my parents.
Okay.
So obviously the police arrived and the brothers told them that the killings had occurred while they were out at the cinema watching Batman. You know?
That's a dumb alibi.
That's
a dumb alibi, because that is so easy to disprove.
True, but they had the tickets because they'd built their alibi after they'd done it. They're rich. But, so the police at the beginning didn't really have much reason to suspect them, and they seemed quite stricken and upset.
Good actors.
However,
it
was the months afterwards that were a bit like, bit sus.
Okay.
So, in the months after the killings, which I shouldn't fail to mention, is that so obviously most of the money was Jose's.
Okay, yeah.
And
who was it left to, though?
The kids are being written out of the will. But now he's been murdered. They get the money.
Why?
I don't know. Don't ask. I don't know why.
Okay.
But yeah, either way, they got the money.
Okay.
So the brothers began to really spend that money, like large amounts of that money.
Jesus Christ.
Very extravagant. They bought luxury items like watches, businesses. Lyle, traveling all over the world. Lyle bought a street cafe. He also bought a buffalo wing restaurant in Princeton, New Jersey, and stuff like a Rolex watch, a Porsche Carrera.
The fuck?
Like, they're going all out. They're not even being sly about it. Eric hired a full-time tennis coach and completed a series of tournaments in places like Israel. The brothers eventually left. They'd left the mansion unoccupied because obviously parents had just been murdered, and instead chose to live in condos, in sort of beachy locations, hotels, that kind of thing, really lavish. They also dined expensively, went to overseas trips to places like the Caribbean and London.
Jesus Christ.
Collectively together, they spent over $700,000 before they were arrested. Yeah. So at the beginning, the police were like, okay, Jose's Cuban. Maybe, he's probably built a lot of enemies.
Maybe there's a gang kind of.
Maybe it's the mob.
Yeah.
So they were investigating that. But as the investigation sort of continued, the brothers were being sus with all this money.
I was gonna say, like, that's not a very clever way of.
And usually, when like that kind of thing happens, to begin with, you got to look at the people closest around them, don't you?
Absolutely.
If a spouse dies, you look at the other spouse.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, we need to kind of eye up these brothers because they're being a bit weird.
They are being a bit weird right now.
And they made sense logically to be the perpetrators because of obviously motive, financial gain, massive.
Motive means an opportunity.
Yeah. And they knew about the will. And that they were being... Oh, I don't know if the will had gone through yet.
Okay.
But they knew they were being written out.
Oh, Jesus.
So that's a huge motive.
That is, right there. That's a smoking gun.
Yeah. So in order to try and get a confession from Eric, the police arranged for his friend, called Craig, to wear a wire during one of their lunches. Craig asked him if he did it. And Eric was like, no, definitely not me. However, Eric was dealing more than Lyle with the guilt.
Okay.
And it was really eating him up.
Okay.
So he was having to see a psychologist.
Okay.
He hadn't told them outright what he'd done, but it was very obvious that he was struggling with something.
Okay.
And eventually...
So suddenly this therapist had a guilty, shifty Menendez brother in his office.
He confessed.
To the therapist?
To the therapist.
Obviously the therapist is going to report that as a crime.
Yeah. So, Jerome, the therapist, at first didn't tell the police. He told his mistress. So I don't know what's with the past, like this case and the last case were mistresses. But they seem to keep cropping up. But yeah, so he's like, oh yeah, mistress, you committed murder.
Guess what? The Menendez brothers did do it.
So the psychiatrist and the mistress ended up breaking up.
What?
I don't right. And then the mistress was like, you know what? Fuck you. I'm going to tell the police what you told me. So she told the police.
My ex, who's a therapist, says that one of the Menendez brothers confessed, but he didn't tell you.
Yeah. However, in that time, Eric had told Lyle that he had told the therapist. Oh, and Lyle was like, oh, fuck's sake, Eric. So Lyle was like, right, I'll fix this. I'll tell him that, you know, you were emotional, you weren't thinking straight. So he's like, I'll book a session with your psychiatrist. Right. So he goes and sees the psychiatrist. They get talking. Lyle breaks down and confesses to the psychiatrist. But, like I said, the psychiatrist has said nothing. It was his mistress.
2 murder confessions on his hands, and he's just like, meh.
Fair enough. So,
Are you murdering me? No, we good, homie.
It's fine, yeah, I'll keep it secret. So Lyle was arrested first on March the 8th, 1990. Eric turned himself in 3 days later after he returned to LA from Israel from one of his little tennis tournaments. They were both held without bail, and they were kept separate from each other. So in August of 1990, the judge James Albrecht ruled that the tapes, so their therapist sessions were taped.
Yeah.
So their confessions were taped.
Yeah.
The judge ruled that these tapes were admissible evidence, because the psychologist has now said that Lyle apparently threatened him at one point and had violated, therefore, the doctor-patient confidentiality. So the judge's ruling was appealed, and that delayed the court process for like 2 years.
Okay.
So then the Court of California ruled in August 1992 that the tapes were admissible, except for the tape where Eric was recorded discussing the murders.
Okay.
So most of the other tapes are okay.
So Lyle's still on the hook.
It looks like. So after that decision, the LA County grand jury issued indictments on December 1992, charging the brothers with the murders of the parents. So, obviously, the court case was highly publicised, and the media was, you know, you'll find pictures and videos and stuff all over the internet.
Yeah.
It was a very public case, and it was, like I said, a case where people were divided.
Yeah.
The brothers were convincing, but they also had money, so they could hire the best people. So the brothers stated that they did kill their parents, but they had killed them out of fear for their lives, after a lifetime of abuse at the hands of their parents, especially sexual abuse at the hands of Jose. They described him as a cruel perfectionist and paedophile. They called their mother an enabling, selfish, mentally unstable, alcoholic and drug addict.
Okay.
And she apparently encouraged her husband's behaviour and was also violent towards the brothers. Again, this is their words. No one else knows if it's true.
True.
The allegations against the couple were actually supported by 2 other family members during their testimonies. The brother's cousin, Andy Cano, said that as a child he was told by Eric, but again, these are people that are just saying what they've been told previously by the brothers. So again, still don't really know if it's true.
True, but as children, I'm making an assumption here, but generally as a rule, as children...
You don't lie about that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you don't tend to think, oh, what if my dad cuts me out the will, or what if I need to, like... you're not, as a rule, you don't tend to be that conniving.
True, but you know...
And this is all stuff that we've mentioned 10, 15 years beforehand. You couldn't just pop out of nowhere.
Money wasn't mentioned when they were kids. It was the abuse that was mentioned when they were kids.
Yeah.
Mostly by Lyle, but obviously things have been told by Eric as well. Granted, you know, kids don't tend to lie about that kind of thing because, you know, they don't really understand that kind of thing.
Yeah.
However, you know, we have done cases in the past where children have been villains, you know.
It's true. Have
done bad things. So...
I'm just saying, if I were abused all that time, if they were abused for all that time, as bad and as horrifically as they say they were, I'm just saying personally, if that were me, if I were then to find out I was being cut out the will, I would snap too.
Yeah.
Like I'd lose my shit as well.
I've researched this whole thing, and even at the end, I still don't know what I believe.
It's difficult because there's only really two people can actually confirm what the truth is.
Yeah, but even if the parents were still alive,
No, I'm
very
talking about the
doubtful.
brothers. I'm talking about the brothers.
Yeah, I know, but it's very doubtful the parents would ever admit to that kind of thing.
True, but there's only the only two people in this whole situation who can say conclusively why they did it is them.
Yeah.
And if they're not going to be truthful or give the whole truth or even be believed that they are speaking the truth now,
yeah,
then they're fucked.
But yeah, so the cousin, Andy Cano, said that when he was a child, he was told by Eric about the sexual abuse, which both Eric and Lionel described things like penis massages.
Okay.
Their
own,
which
or their
is
father's?
very like, which I'm assuming would be. Oh, it doesn't actually say if it was the father to them or them to the father.
Yeah. I
mean,
both are.
But
very
either way,
much.
that's quite like a children language.
Yeah.
Isn't it? That Diane van der Molen, the cousin that had told Kitty. Obviously, Lyle had told her about the molestation.
It's interesting that one brother each told one cousin.
Yeah.
Like if it were like Eric specifically telling his cousins, that would be more convincing for me because it's normally found in sibling groups of abuse that one is far more talkative about it than the other.
Yeah.
Because the younger one is normally in some way, shape, or form kind of protected by the older sibling.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So it would make sense to me if Eric did the talking to the younger siblings, but the fact that Lyle is talking about it is a little bit strange to me. But I suppose,
So a photograph actually was presented as physical evidence by the defense, showing, and they'd hired like the most expensive defense person as well.
I mean, they fucking needed it with these charges.
Yeah. And it showed allegedly, Lyle and Eric's genitalia taken by their father when they were children.
Okay.
The prosecution argued that the killings were obviously done for financial purpose. However, that was disputed by the defense, claiming they didn't think they were getting any inheritance. So, the financial gain wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
According to the defense. Lyle's prosecutor, Pam, argued that men could not be raped because they lacked the necessary equipment to be raped.
So many issues with that sentence.
Yep. I did not enjoy typing that up.
I remember when I was younger and I was like a lot more naive, I didn't think that boys could be raped either.
Mm.
And I remember there being a discussion in school we were talking about because we'd heard that a girl in the upper years had been raped on the way home after school, and she'd immediately been withdrawn from school and taken to a different school to recover, and she didn't want to be in the school that I attended. And it brought out that discussion about rape and stuff like that because it was the first time any of us had really heard about it. We were like 14, 13 at that point. And none of us had really, it was nothing any of us had ever really encountered before, as we were discussing it. And I remember thinking, boys can't get raped. What the fuck do they know about it? And yeah, it was a very alarming conversation to have with my parents when I went home and they explained it to me. And I was like, because you have, as a child, as a young person, you have such a narrow-minded view about what rape actually is. And I mean, for those of you who are lucky enough not to have to experience it and stuff like that, it's very much, there's a stereotypical view you have of it, and then there's everything else that you don't learn until you're either an adult or it happens to you.
A bit more taboo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you don't
not
really
spoken about.
And it saddens me that someone can get to that age and be that far into their career.
Yeah.
And still have that narrow-minded opinion that men can't be raped because it's just simply not true.
Yeah. Eric testified a few weeks before the night of the killings that he had told Lyle about the abuse he had experienced, which led to them having several confrontations with the family.
Okay.
They also testified that their father threatened to kill them if they didn't keep the abuse a secret.
I can believe that.
They also claimed that the last confrontation happened inside the house den on August the 20th, 1989, which was a few minutes before Kitty and Jose were killed. The brothers then stated that their father closed the den's door at the time, which was unusual. And they were paranoid and afraid that they were about to be killed by the parents, because, it's quite obvious they weren't keeping it quiet. So they went outside of the house to load their shotguns. And Eric stated, to quote, "As I went into the room, I just started firing." Both brothers were eventually convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. And that was in the penalty phase of the trial.
Mm-hmm.
They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The jury said that the abuse defense was not a factor in their deliberations, and that they had just decided not to impose the death penalty because both brothers had no criminal record whatsoever or history of violence before these murders. However, unlike the juries in the previous trials, the jury in the penalty phase rejected the defense theory that the brothers killed their parents out of fear and believed that they committed the killings in order to get the money. California's Department of Corrections had kept the brothers separated when they were in prison. They'd been sent to different prisons. Since they were considered to be maximum security inmates, they were segregated from all of the prisoners as well.
Jesus Christ.
On April the 4th, 2018, Lyle was moved into the same housing unit as Eric, which reunited them for the first time since they began serving their sentence nearly 22 years earlier.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, both brothers burst into tears and hugged each other at their first meeting in the housing unit. The unit where they are housed is reserved for inmates who agree to participate in education and rehabilitation programs without creating disruptions.
Okay.
So that is the case of the Menendez brothers. I still don't know what to think.
It's difficult.
It's plausible.
I think there is more than a little bit of truth to it. I think there's a lot. But the fact that they completely...
Look, they agreed. They admitted to the murder.
Yeah.
They definitely did it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I can't say for certain I think they planned it. I don't know.
The only thing that makes me curious as to how they play is if they had a shotgun and they'd both been like, we both went upstairs into our rooms in that house where we frequently inhabited and got our shotguns, I'd believe it was a little bit more spontaneous. But the fact that they had them in the car...
But don't forget about that one bit when the mother was already dying, crawling along the floor to escape.
Shot her back in the face after 5 minutes of reloading.
Yeah, he had gone out of the house to the car to get more bullets and then come back and shoot his mum in the face. I don't know. It's a tough one.
There's bits where I'm like, oh, it was justified. And then there's bits where I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
The reunion does kind of warm my heart a bit.
Yeah, I mean, for all they hated, loathed, feared, whatever adjective you want to use, their parents, they clearly
close.
loved each other deeply.
Yeah. But there is the Menendez brothers.
The one on the right is absolutely better looking than the other one.
That one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know which one that is. I think that could be Eric.
I thought that was Lyle.
I don't know.
I thought Lyle was the brown-haired one and Eric was the black-haired one, I thought.
He's the one that's good at tennis, though.
Is he the one that's good at tennis?
I'm pretty sure he's the one that's good at tennis. I think I've seen pictures of him in his tennis outfit, so I'm pretty sure that's Kyle.
That's Lyle. Or Eric.
Eric.
It was Kyle there. I was like, who the fuck is Kyle?
We've made a third sibling.
Oh my god, the third sibling.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I still don't know, and I don't think for certain
anyone will.
We ever will know. Yeah. So it's kind of a, was justice
Unsolved.
served, or I don't know. Should
the
they be
thing that
let
does bother
out?
me is the fact that the jury didn't in any way kind of take into account the child abuse.
As well, yeah. And I also
That
do
bothers
think...
me because I mean, how many pictures are going around of people's genitalia taken at the age of 11 or 12?
True, but
Apparently
also,
taken by parents. Like,
if you think about it, in 2018 they'd already served 22 years.
yeah.
We're in 2023 now.
Mm-hmm.
What's that, like 25 years?
Yeah.
That's a life sentence. I think, unpopular opinion, look, fair enough if they had reason, motive to kill their parents.
Yeah.
I don't think they're a threat to other people.
No, I think they were a threat to their parents because their parents may or may not have deserved it.
They're involved, highly involved, and they're now mixed with other roommates as well.
Yeah.
They're now highly involved in rehabilitation things.
Yeah.
Educational things.
Yeah. Bettering their lives.
25 years is a life sentence.
Yeah.
That is the standard life sentence. I think they should be eligible for parole.
I think they should be eligible for, absolutely. Like, 25 years.
They've had no offences during their prison time. They've had no issues whatsoever.
Yeah.
So,
unpopular opinion, they should be released.
I'm not saying they should be released, but they should be considered. It should be looked into, I reckon.
25 years is... They've spent more time in prison than they have out of it.
Yeah.
Because they were in their very early 20s when they went to prison, weren't they?
Yeah, so...
They've spent more time inside of a jail cell than they have outside of a jail cell. And let's be honest, when you're in your early 20s, you're still a kid, basically. Like, your thought process, especially as a man, because boys' brains, they take longer to mature. You don't think things through logically.
I don't think they're going to be a threat to anyone else.
No.
And
that's
really
the point
honest,
of prison, is putting people...
And if they're involved in these rehabilitation programs, surely they're
learning things to use on the outside.
Yeah.
To be functioning members of society.
So it makes no sense to keep them in there.
If someone's on a life sentence and fully without parole, no chance of going back into the community again, why would you use that money and spend those resources on two people who are never going to be able to be a part of society again?
Yeah, literally.
Like, it doesn't make sense.
I don't know, but that's my unpopular take. So
I'm in agreement with you. Like, I went into this episode being like, of course it's obvious that they were justified in killing them. And now, like, there's a seed of doubt in there.
Yeah.
But it's not... If it were me, I would have taken into account the abuse, because God knows that kind of abuse, it doesn't produce rational responses out of anybody. Like, you've got a whole childhood of sexual abuse. You've got your mother being not the mother figure she should be.
If that's all true.
If it's true.
But we don't know. If it's true,
we don't know. But at the same time, what if it is?
Yeah, exactly.
Because no one's going to go through 18, 20 years of that kind of treatment and come out a rational human being.
Yeah. Well, that was episode
27.
Menendez Brothers. So many more questions.
You've rocked my world tonight with this case.
Don't you worry.
Is it going to get worse?
No. The last two cases are very, very small. The next one is particularly short just because it's more of an unproven theory.
Okay.
In a way, so a bit different from our usual thing.
Alright.
But
hit me with it. We wanted to mix it up a bit.
It's what I found interesting, so I wanted to share it.
Yeah? Share it with me.
So thank you very much for listening.
Episode 28 next week.
It will.
And we will see you there, guys. Stay safe. Don't go shooting anybody with a shotgun.
Preferably not your parents.
Definitely not your parents.
Yeah. So I've been Beth.
I have been Becky. We're still the same, roughly. And we will see you next week.
Alright. Farewell.